Ever watch someone spin such an elaborate web of lies that they accidentally hang themselves with it? Yeah, that was my Tuesday. The morning light over Portland filtered through half-closed blinds, painting pale stripes across the apartment. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and reheated coffee. I'm Irene Dawson, and I stood by the sink, scrubbing a pan I'd already washed twice, my shoulders tight from another sleepless night. My day started before sunrise, stocking shelves at a small grocery store until noon, then logging in for my second job as a remote logistics coordinator. Every dollar mattered. The mortgage payment loomed like a silent countdown at the end of each month. Behind me, a wheelchair creaked. Victor, my husband, tried to maneuver toward the table, his legs still stiff from the accident months ago. "Morning," he murmured, reaching for the orange juice. I smiled faintly, poured him a glass, then checked my phone for delivery schedules. Before I could take a sip of coffee, the sound of a key twisting in the front door made me freeze. Gloria Dawson didn't knock. She never did. The door swung open, and her perfume, sharp, floral, overbearing, filled the kitchen. "I brought groceries," she announced, setting a single paper bag on the counter. Her eyes swept the room, landing on the pile of laundry in the corner, the stack of medical bills near the toaster. "Good heavens, Irene, you call this tidy? Poor Victor, having to live in such chaos." I took a slow breath, counted to 3. "Good morning, Gloria. The house is fine. I just finished my shift." "Oh, I can tell," Gloria replied, lips curling. "You look exhausted. I told Victor a woman shouldn't work herself like that. It's not healthy for a marriage." She opened the fridge, clucked her tongue. "Mold on the cheese again. You should really plan your meals better. Fresh food builds strength." Victor tried to interject, embarrassed. "Mom, it's fine. Irene cooks every night." Gloria waved him off. "Sweetheart, you're too kind. She means well, but domestic skills aren't exactly her strength. Maybe when she has a real family to guide her." The words landed like tiny cuts. I didn't turn around, just rinsed the sponge and said evenly, "I appreciate your concern, but I've got it handled." Gloria's smile sharpened. "Handled? On 2 jobs and takeout dinners? My son deserves better. When I was your age, I stayed home, took care of my husband. He never had to lift a finger." I dried my hands and finally met her gaze. "You also had savings, Gloria. We don't. Someone has to keep the bills paid." For a second, the older woman blinked, then laughed softly, a sound dripping with disdain. "Of course, always about money with you. You young wives, you marry for love until the checkbook dries up, then it's complaints and overtime shifts." She turned to Victor, patting his shoulder. "I warned you, didn't I? A wife only needs her husband when he still brings something to the table." The silence that followed was heavy and brittle. My throat tightened, but I said nothing. I only gathered my purse, keys, and work badge from the counter. "I'll be late for my shift," I murmured. As the door closed behind me, Gloria's perfume still lingered in the air, along with that final sentence echoing like a curse. "A wife only needs her husband when he still brings something to the table." That was the moment I realized the cracks in my marriage weren't from exhaustion. They'd been carved slowly by the woman who just smiled in my kitchen. It had started with something as simple as a cup of gas station coffee and a tired smile. Years before the arguments, before the accident. I met Victor on a cold November night at a rest stop off I-84. He was a long-haul truck driver then. Easygoing, talkative, the kind of man who remembered to hold doors open. I was 25, working the register at a convenience store while saving for a logistics certification. He came in every few days on his delivery route, always ordering black coffee, joking that I made it better than any diner on the road. Their friendship turned into something steadier. Victor would call from distant states, describing sunsets over the plains, the hum of diesel engines at dawn. He made me feel noticed in a world that rarely looked twice. For a girl who grew up in foster homes, that warmth felt like a promise. When he proposed 6 months later with a cheap silver ring and an honest smile, I said yes without hesitation. At first, marriage was simple. Small apartment, shared bills, late-night takeout, and laughter. Then Gloria entered our daily rhythm.
She lived an hour away in Salem,
called every evening. Her voice carried equal parts worry and command. Eat real food, Victor. Irene's too busy chasing paychecks to cook. The comments began as jokes, then sharpened. Victor brushed them off, but I noticed how he flinched each time his phone lit up with Mom. When we decided to buy a condo in Portland, I sold the tiny studio I'd bought before marriage. My down payment covered most of the purchase. Gloria insisted on holding Victor's savings, money he claimed to have from his late father, for an upcoming medical procedure she never actually scheduled. I didn't protest. I wanted peace more than fairness. Then came the accident. A careless driver ran a red light, crushing the side of Victor's truck. He survived, but left the hospital with both legs in casts and a long recovery ahead. In those first weeks, I believed love could feel the cracks. I handled insurance calls, medical forms, physical therapy appointments. Gloria visited daily, bringing homemade soups and criticism in equal measure. If you hadn't pushed him to work so hard, this wouldn't have happened. Money drained fast. Insurance covered part of the rehab, but not the mortgage or utilities. I took an extra shift at the store and a second job entering freight data at night. Meanwhile, Gloria hovered, rearranging the kitchen, insisting on choosing Victor's clothes, telling him when to take painkillers. The apartment no longer felt like home. It felt like territory divided between mother and wife. Sometimes when I came home past midnight, I'd find them laughing at old family videos. My husband relaxed in a way he never was around me anymore. The sight left me hollow. I loved him, but his world had tilted back toward the woman who never let go. By the time the casts came off, I realized the marriage had shifted into something I could no longer recognize. One where Gloria's voice carried more weight than mine. And every act of care felt like proof I was failing. It wasn't hatred that grew inside me then. It was fatigue, heavy and silent. The kind that seeps into the bones and waits for a breaking point. The morning the lies began, I was already exhausted. Gloria showed up unannounced again. She stepped inside, inspecting everything like she owned the place. It smells lived in. I brought chicken soup. Yours look like something out of a can. I made that soup from scratch, Gloria, yesterday. She lifted the pot lid, sniffed, gave a pitying smile. Maybe that's the problem. You don't know when food goes bad. She turned toward Victor. Sweetheart, tell her you shouldn't be eating leftovers. You need fresh meals to heal. Victor rubbed his temples. Mom, please. Don't interrupt me, Gloria snapped. Then resumed her inspection. She ran a finger along the counter, checking for dust. And look at this, grease on the stove. How can a woman keep a home like this? You work all day, but you can't even manage a simple household. My hands tightened around my coffee mug. For months, I'd swallowed every insult, every accusation disguised as advice. But something in me finally cracked. Gloria, I said evenly, if you're so worried about Victor's care, maybe you should handle it yourself. I'm sure you'd do it better. The silence that followed felt electric. Victor looked between us, startled. Gloria's painted lips curved slowly into a smirk. Oh, you'd like that, wouldn't you? A little vacation while someone else cleans up after your husband. I wouldn't call it a vacation. There's a meeting in Seattle next week. My manager wants to discuss remote work options. I can't keep up 2 jobs forever. Gloria placed a hand dramatically over her chest. You'd leave him alone? In his condition? Irene, honestly, that's cold, even for you. I wouldn't leave him alone, I said quietly. You just volunteered. Victor tried to diffuse the tension with a nervous chuckle. Let's not turn this into a fight. But Gloria's tone softened suddenly, falsely sweet. No fight at all, darling. If your wife needs to chase her little career dreams, I'll stay here. I'll make sure you're cared for properly. Perhaps when she returns, she'll see how much better things run with the woman who truly loves you. I felt the words slice deeper than intended, yet I forced a calm smile. Perfect, I said. Then it settled.
Gloria nodded, clearly pleased with her victory. Good. You'll see, Victor. Once I'm here, you'll finally have peace. I turned away before they could see the tears rising behind my eyes. Peace, I thought bitterly, had never felt so much like surrender. But for the first time in months, a quiet, dangerous thought flickered inside me. Maybe letting Gloria take control was exactly what needed to happen. Because this time, I'd be watching from a distance, and I wouldn't come back the same. The night before my planned trip, the apartment pulsed with tension. Victor's voice cut through the quiet. So you're really doing this, without even asking me? I told you, it's just a short business trip. I need to meet with my supervisor about remote work. It could make things easier for both of us. For both of us. He let out a bitter laugh. That's funny, because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're just running away. My pulse thudded in my ears. Running away? Victor, I've been holding this family together since your accident. I'm trying to find a way to keep us afloat. You know the bills are piling up. And whose fault is that? He snapped. You're the one who keeps saying we can't live on one paycheck, that I can't provide. Maybe if you didn't have to prove you're some big career woman, things would be different. I blinked, stunned. That's not fair. Life's not fair, he shot back, echoing a tone I'd heard before. From Gloria. Mom said it from the start. A woman only stays while a man has something to give. Once he's broken, she starts packing her bags. The words hit me harder than he realized. I finally whispered, You really believe that? He looked away, jaw tightening. I don't know what to believe anymore. Maybe she's right. You barely talk to me, you're never home, you work yourself to death, and for what? To show everyone you can live without me? I'm doing this for us, Victor, I said, my voice trembling but steady. You think I want to work double shifts? You think I like coming home to find your mother criticizing everything I do? I'm trying to keep this roof over our heads. He didn't answer. The silence between them stretched until it felt suffocating. Finally, he muttered, If you walk out that door tomorrow, don't expect me to be waiting. Something inside me went cold. The man I'd married, the one who once made me laugh with road stories and silly songs, was gone. In his place sat someone small and angry, someone who needed a villain more than a partner. I closed my suitcase quietly and said, Then don't wait. He turned toward me, startled, but I didn't meet his eyes. I grabbed my coat and stepped into the hallway. That night, I stayed at my friend Natalie's apartment. The space was small, but alive. Children's drawings on the fridge, laundry folded neatly in baskets. It was the kind of home built by endurance, not luck. Natalie handed me a mug of tea. You look worse than when we were pulling all-nighters in the group home, she said, half joking, half concerned. I smiled faintly. That bad, huh? Worse, Natalie said. You're running on fumes. She leaned against the counter, arms folded. So what happened this time? Let me guess. Gloria again. I sighed. She's watching Victor while I'm going to Seattle. It's just a week. I need to meet with my supervisor about working remotely. Natalie's brow furrowed. You're leaving her in charge of your husband? The woman who's been trying to tear you down for 2 years? She's his mother, I said softly. Maybe if she takes care of him for a bit, she'll finally see how hard it is. Natalie set her cup down a little too sharply. Or maybe she'll see how easy it is to push you out completely. The words hung in the air like static. I didn't answer. Natalie walked over and crouched in front of me, voice gentler now. Irene, you've been doing this your whole life, believing people will change if you just love them enough. Remember the foster home? You were always the one fixing everyone's mess, even when it broke you. That was different, I murmured. No, it wasn't. Natalie's tone was steady but kind. You can't build your future around a man who lets his mother decide who you are. That's not love. It's dependency. Don't let it swallow you. I rubbed my temples, the tea cooling in my hands. You make it sound so simple, but he's not a bad person. He's just lost. Once he's back on his feet, things will be different. Her friend shook her head. You're hoping for a version of him that might never come back. I forced a smile, the kind people wear when they're too tired to argue. Let's just say I need this trip, to clear my head, to breathe a little. Natalie sighed, but didn't press further. You know the door's always open. The next morning, I hugged her goodbye, promising to call once I arrived in Seattle. But as I drove toward Union Station, suitcase beside me, I felt the first uneasy weight of a thought I couldn't quite name, like a shadow on the horizon. Something told me this trip wouldn't end the way I imagined. Union Station buzzed with the sound of rolling suitcases and echoing announcements. The air smelled faintly of coffee and rain, typical Portland in early spring. I checked the departure board for my train to Seattle, then found an empty bench near the far end of the concourse. I glanced at my phone, no messages from Victor, none from Gloria either. For the first time in weeks, I exhaled without feeling watched. I opened my laptop to skim through notes from my meeting, trying to focus, but my attention drifted to the hum of voices nearby, commuters talking, kids laughing, the static of daily life. Then, among the noise, a familiar voice cut through like a blade. I told you, don't worry, I'll take care of everything. My spine stiffened. That voice. Gloria's. My head turned sharply. Just a few feet away, behind a pillar near the cafe, Gloria Dawson stood with her phone pressed to her ear, dressed in her usual beige trench coat and pearl earrings. She looked far too composed for someone who should have been home caring for her injured son. No, listen to me, Gloria said, lowering her voice just enough to make people lean in. He's fragile. Poor thing doesn't even know how bad it is. His wife's barely hanging on. Some kind of terminal thing. The doctor said, yes, I'll get the money from Oliver. He still owes me a favor. And it's not like he needs to know the truth. My stomach twisted. Oliver? I leaned back slightly, heart pounding. I hadn't heard that name in years, not since the group home when Oliver Hayes was the boy who always defended me from bullies. My first friend, my first love. And now Gloria was using his name in a scam. Gloria's voice grew more animated. Don't you see? Once I have the cash, we can finally settle everything, pay off the condo, maybe even move Victor somewhere better. The woman is as good as gone anyway. It's what's best for everyone. The words hit me like cold water. Gone. That's how Gloria spoke about me, like I was already dead. I wanted to confront her right there, to demand an explanation. But instinct told me to stay quiet. Gloria ended the call and adjusted her coat, muttering something about catching the 10:30 train. My hands trembled as I watched the older woman walk toward the platform. She's leaving town and meeting Oliver. In that instant, my plans changed. The meeting in Seattle no longer mattered. I grabbed my suitcase and followed, keeping several yards behind. Every nerve in my body buzzed with disbelief and fury. But beneath it all was a sharper, colder clarity. This was the moment everything had led to. Gloria thought she'd fooled everyone, but not this time. As the whistle of the departing train echoed through the station, I stepped aboard the same car. My expression calm, my pulse a storm. I didn't know what I would find at the end of this journey, but I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't the one being fooled anymore. The train rattled out of Portland just as the rain began to fade into a pale drizzle. I sat 2 rows behind Gloria, my body still tense from the rush of boarding unnoticed. I'd managed to find a seat near the window, close enough to hear, but far enough not to be seen. Every squeal of the wheels against the tracks felt like the ticking of a clock, counting down to something inevitable. Gloria sat facing another passenger, a man in his 50s, dressed in a tailored gray coat. Her voice carried easily over the rhythmic hum of the train. Yes, I'm going to meet him in West Lynn, she was saying cheerfully. Oliver Hayes, such a generous young man. I practically raised him. My son's poor wife is in terrible condition, lung cancer, stage 4. It's heartbreaking. The man gasped softly. I'm so sorry to hear that. Gloria nodded, sighing with theatrical grief. Yes, she's bedridden. My son refuses to leave her side. Such a devoted husband. Bless him. But the hospital bills? You can imagine. We're desperate for help. And Oliver always had a soft spot for her. Such a shame she's wasting away. My hands clenched around the edge of my seat. Wasting away. The words tasted like poison. Gloria continued, lowering her voice just enough to make people lean in. Of course, she's not exactly an angel. Poor Victor doesn't even know half of it. How she spent his money, how she flirted with that doctor during rehab. But I suppose guilt comes for everyone eventually.
My heart was pounding, my vision blurring. I wanted to stand up, to shout the truth for the whole car to hear. That I wasn't dying, wasn't cheating, wasn't anything Gloria painted me to be. But I stayed still, nails digging into my palms. Outside the window, the Loriment River glimmered under the gray sky as the train curved south. The landscape blurred, pine forests, bridges, small towns flashing by. Inside, Gloria's voice kept weaving its web of lies, each word another thread tightening around my throat. When the train slowed near Oregon City, I forced myself to breathe. This wasn't just cruelty. It was a plan. Gloria was manipulating Oliver, the one person from my past who might actually care enough to help. If I exposed the lie too soon, everything could collapse before I had proof. I reached for my phone, pretending to scroll while discreetly recording Gloria's words. The red light blinked faintly, a silent witness. As the train rolled toward West Lynn, my reflection stared back at me in the window, calm on the surface but burning underneath. My tears never fell. Instead, I whispered to myself, almost like a vow, "You can't erase me, Gloria. Not this time." And with that, I waited for the moment the train would stop, ready to follow wherever the lies led next. The train pulled into West Lynn just past noon, the sky a quiet silver. I waited until Gloria stepped onto the platform before following at a careful distance. The older woman walked briskly through the small town, her heels clicking against the wet pavement, one hand clutching her designer handbag. I trailed her across narrow streets lined with boutique shops and cafes, until they reached the gates of a large property, a modern 2-story home framed by cedar trees and glass. The name on the mailbox? Hayes. Gloria pressed the doorbell, smoothing her coat as if preparing for a performance. A moment later, a man appeared. Oliver Hayes. He was older than I remembered, sharper features, broader shoulders, but his eyes were unmistakable, the same warm gray that had once made me feel safe. He greeted Gloria with a polite smile, confusion flickering across his face. "Mrs. Dawson, it's been a long time." "I wish this visit were under happier circumstances," Gloria began, her voice heavy with practiced sorrow. "Irene, my son's wife, you remember her. She's dying. It's been awful. Victor is beside himself. We just don't have the means for her care." Oliver's expression softened instantly. "Irene? I hadn't heard. That's terrible." He stepped aside. "Please, come in." From my hiding spot near the gate, I felt my stomach twist. I watched as the two disappeared into the house, my heart pounding as minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Finally, Gloria emerged, smiling faintly, tucking an envelope into her purse before walking back toward town. When she was gone, I approached the house, nerves trembling beneath my resolve. I rang the bell. A few seconds later, the door opened, and Oliver froze. "Irene?" he whispered, eyes wide. I nodded, my voice low. "Alive, and not dying. Surprised?" He stepped back, speechless, then gestured for me to come in. I followed him into a living room flooded with natural light, elegant but unpretentious, much like the boy I once knew. "What's going on?" he asked finally. "Your mother-in-law said that I'm terminally ill, that Victor's bankrupt trying to keep me alive?" I gave a short, bitter laugh. "She's been using you, Oliver. She just took your money." He looked down, anger flashing in his eyes. "I gave it willingly. I thought I was helping you." I hesitated, then said softly, "You always did." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Oliver exhaled, his shoulders lowering. "You have no idea how many times I looked for you after the home closed. My adoptive parents moved me overseas for school. I thought I'd lost everyone from that part of my life." I blinked, emotion catching in my throat. "And now you find me here, married to a man whose mother just conned you." Oliver's jaw tightened. "She won't get away with it. I'll make sure of that. Whatever she told people about you, I'll help you clear your name." I nodded slowly, the weight of months of humiliation easing just a little. "I don't need revenge," I said, my voice steady. "Just the truth." Oliver looked at me for a long moment, then said quietly, "Then we'll start there." Outside, the rain had stopped, and for the first time in a long while, I felt the air in my lungs again, sharp, clean, and alive with possibility. Oliver insisted I stay for lunch. The dining room was filled with soft light, filtered through tall glass panels overlooking the garden. The smell of roasted herbs drifted from the kitchen, and soon a woman appeared carrying a tray. Elegant, silver-haired, composed in that quiet, commanding way that needed no introduction. "This is my mother," Oliver said. "Eleanor Hayes." Eleanor set the tray down, her movements deliberate, graceful. "So you're Irene," she said, studying me with the calm that saw more than words could tell. "Oliver told me everything, or at least what little he understands." I felt my nerves tighten. "Then I owe you an apology, Mrs. Hayes. I didn't mean to intrude." "Nonsense," Eleanor interrupted softly, pulling out a chair. "You look like someone who's been told to apologize her whole life. Sit." The authority in her tone left no room for argument. I obeyed. We ate quietly for a few minutes. Eleanor poured tea and finally said, "I've met women like Gloria before. Sweet smiles, tragic stories, and a dozen victims in their wake. Manipulation is an art they perfect over time." I looked down at my plate. "She's good at it," I admitted. "Even Victor believes her." "Of course he does," Eleanor replied, her tone not unkind. "Children raised under control rarely recognize it. They mistake fear for loyalty." She set her cup down. "And you? Why do you still feel responsible for her?" I hesitated, searching for words. "Because I married her son. Because I thought if I just worked harder, loved more, I could fix what was broken." Eleanor smiled sadly. "That's the curse of good people, my dear. You think endurance is love." The room fell silent again. Outside, the wind rustled through the cedars. Oliver watched them both quietly, the lines around his eyes softening. Eleanor reached across the table, her hand warm against my cold fingers. "You've been surviving for too long," she said. "Stay here a few days. Rest. Think. You don't make good choices when you're exhausted." I blinked, emotion tightening my throat. "I can't impose." "You'd be doing me a favor," Eleanor interrupted softly. "I've been meaning to fill this house with someone who doesn't pretend." For the first time in years, I felt something other than duty. I felt seen. The tension in my chest loosened. I nodded slowly. "All right, a few days." Eleanor smiled, satisfied. "Good. Then we'll talk about what comes next, after you remember who you are." And as the light faded across the Hayes estate, I realized I hadn't felt this kind of peace since long before I became a Dawson. The sky over Portland was the color of tin when I returned home. I'd spent 3 days at the Hayes estate, just long enough to regain my balance and decide to confront the mess head-on. As I pulled into the parking lot of my apartment complex, something immediately felt wrong. My parking spot was empty, Victor's old truck was gone, and when I reached the door, my key no longer fit. I tried again, then again, the metal scraping uselessly. From inside came footsteps, a pause, and then the familiar syrupy voice I'd come to dread. "Oh, Irene, you're back." Gloria stood in the doorway, dressed as though she were hosting a dinner party, not breaking the law. Behind her, the apartment looked rearranged. Victor's recliner angled differently, my framed photo from our wedding conspicuously gone. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice calm but tight. Gloria tilted her head. "Victor thought it best to change the locks, you see, dear. Things have progressed while you were gone." Before I could respond, Victor appeared behind his mother. He looked thinner, paler, his braces gone, though his steps were uncertain. His eyes, however, were firm in a way that chilled me. "Victor," I said, "why did you change the locks?" He didn't meet my gaze. "Irene, I think it's best if we separate. Mom and I talked to a lawyer. The divorce papers are ready. You'll get your share once the assets are divided."
"Divorce?" I repeated softly. "You made that decision without even speaking to me." Gloria stepped in, smug. "He's realized the truth. Finally. You've been draining him for years. His health, his peace, his finances. It's time he took back control." My pulse pounded, but I didn't raise my voice. "Gloria, this is my home too. My name is on the mortgage. You can't legally lock me out." Victor's jaw tightened. "I don't love you anymore." For a moment, the world seemed to fall silent. No anger, no shouting, just that single sentence, echoing like a final verdict. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. "Fine," I said evenly. "Let's do this the right way." Gloria's smirk faltered as I called the non-emergency police line. Within 20 minutes, 2 officers arrived, taking statements on the porch. I calmly presented my documentation, the mortgage contract bearing both my and Victor's names. The younger officer glanced at Victor. "Ma'am's correct. You can't deny access to a legal co-owner without a court order. If the locks were changed, she's within her rights to re-enter." Gloria started to protest, but the officer cut her off. "If this continues, we'll treat it as unlawful eviction." I stepped past my mother-in-law into the apartment, my shoes clicking on the hardwood. The air smelled of my own candles, still half burned, the remnants of the life I'd built from exhaustion and hope. I turned to the officers, nodded in gratitude, then looked at Victor for the last time. "You took my love for weakness. That was your first mistake." Then I closed the door behind them, sealing Gloria's outrage and Victor's silence on the other side. Oliver didn't waste time. The morning after the lockout incident, he drove to Portland, picked me up, and took me straight to the office of his attorney. A clean, glass-front firm in downtown, the kind that made people sit up straighter. The attorney, Mark Ellison, listened without interrupting as I laid out everything. The months of harassment, the financial pressure, the sudden change of locks, and most importantly, the lie Gloria had spun at Union Station. When I showed him the recording from the train, and Oliver confirmed there was exterior camera footage from his West Lynn property, Ellison's expression hardened. "This isn't just family drama," he said. "This is fraud, coercion, and attempted unlawful eviction, and she used a false medical emergency to obtain money. That plays very badly in front of an Oregon judge." Within a week, Ellison filed a civil complaint on my behalf, naming both Gloria and, reluctantly, Victor, since he'd participated in the lock change and attempted dispossession. Gloria, certain she was still in control, showed up to the first hearing in a bright blazer and pearls, fully prepared to play the role of the wronged mother. Her confidence lasted exactly 3 minutes. That was how long it took Ellison to play the security footage from the Hayes property. Gloria accepting an envelope of cash from Oliver, claiming it was for my treatment. Then walking away, smiling. The judge, an older woman with sharp eyes and little patience, leaned forward. "Mrs. Dowson, are you telling this court you believed your daughter-in-law was dying?" Gloria floundered. "Well, that is, I may have exaggerated." "You told a third party she was terminal. You told him her husband was financially ruined. Neither was true.
You took his money under false pretenses, and then, within days, you participated in an attempted illegal exclusion of that same woman from a home she co-owns? Victor kept his head down the entire time. He didn't look at me once. In the final ruling, the court was clear. I remained a lawful co-owner of the Portland condo. The attempt to remove me without a court order was illegal. Gloria was ordered to return the full amount she'd obtained from Oliver plus court costs. Because Victor had allowed his mother to act in his name, and because I'd been forced to find temporary lodging during the lockout, the judge granted limited damages to me for emotional distress and disruption of residence. The judgment landed hard. Gloria didn't have enough liquid money to pay everything back. Within months, she was forced to sell her own small house in Salem to satisfy the debt. Victor, still not fully back to work and now without my income to steady him, couldn't keep up with his own bills. Creditors circled. What had begun as an attempt to push me out ended with the two of them, mother and son, staring at the wreckage of their finances. I, meanwhile, moved forward. I stayed for a while in West Lynn, working remotely, just as I'd originally planned to request. A few months later, I gave birth to a healthy baby girl at a Portland hospital. When Oliver visited the room carrying pale pink flowers, I placed the baby in his arms and said, "Her name is Anna." He looked at me in surprise. After the life I wanted to have, a clean one, a chosen one. Outside that hospital, the world went on, unaware that quiet justice had been done. Gloria and Victor now rented a small, unimpressive apartment far from the city center. The kind of place where no one cared about their old excuses. The condo stayed with me, legally and permanently. I hadn't screamed, hadn't destroyed, hadn't played dirty. I'd simply told the truth and let the system do the rest. And in that, there was a different kind of revenge. One written in court orders and notarized pages, impossible to undo. A full year passed before the rhythm of my life began to feel my own again. The condo in Portland was sold. The proceeds helped me clear debts and start anew. In West Lynn, where the seated trees framed a quieter sky. I worked remotely now, running logistics for a regional firm from a small home office that overlooked the garden. Each morning, sunlight spilled across my desk while little Anna babbled in a bassinet nearby, her tiny hands grasping at the air. It wasn't the life I'd once imagined, but it was mine, built from truth instead of compromise. I no longer measured my days in what I could endure, but in what I could create. Oliver visited often at first, bringing groceries, helping with repairs, staying longer each time. It began with shared dinners, casual, familiar, threaded with laughter that felt too easy for people who'd both been through so much. One evening, as we sat outside with mugs of tea and the soft hum of crickets, he said quietly, "You never had to do any of it alone, you know?" "I did," I replied, smiling faintly, "but I'm glad I don't have to anymore." By the next spring, their companionship had settled into something steadier. Love that didn't demand or bruise. Love that listened. When Oliver proposed, he did it simply. A gold band in the palm of his hand, sunlight glinting off the metal. Eleanor stood behind him, her expression warm and approving. The wedding was held in the garden, just the three of them and a local officiant. Eleanor served as witness, her hands trembling slightly as she signed her name beneath theirs. "Every woman deserves to begin again," she whispered as she kissed my cheek. After the ceremony, Oliver lifted Anna into his arms while I stood beside them, the smell of roses thick in the air. For the first time, my future didn't feel like something I had to fight for. It was simply waiting for me, open and whole. Far away, the Dawson story unraveled. Gloria, stripped of her savings and reputation, lived in a decaying rental on the outskirts of Salem. She tried to rebuild by controlling what little she had left, but even that slipped away when Victor, resentful and desperate, quietly emptied her account. By the time she realized it, it was too late. He'd vanished, leaving only debts behind. The woman who once prided herself on control now faced the one truth she could never manipulate: loss. I heard about it months later through a mutual acquaintance. I listened in silence, then nodded once, expression unreadable. That night, after putting Anna to bed, I stood by the window, watching the moonlight touch the crib. My reflection in the glass looked older, calmer, unrecognizable to the woman who used to flinch at every knock on the door. I whispered softly, almost to myself, I didn't destroy them. I just stopped saving them. And in that quiet, steady truth, there was no vengeance left, only peace. Drop a like and subscribe for more stories that prove sometimes the universe knows exactly what it's doing. See you in the next one.